Hi, I'm Frank Carlyle. I'm a local historian, and through time, Liverpool's history seems to have taken a different slant to what it should have been. Subsequently, through Chinese whispers and bad, misinformed historical authors, people have the wrong image and an entirely different interpretation of our history. And included in that are some of our own citizens. Therefore, allow me to take you on Frank Carlyle's Liverpool Unravelled. This is the interior of St George's Hall. It was designed by a 23-year-old architect, Harvey Lonsdale Elms. It had taken from 1842 to 1854 to complete, a long 12 years. This hall has its own myth, and the myth surrounds that it was built back to front. Let's unravel this myth once and for all. Let's look at this myth logically. Here where I am is St John's Gardens, not St George's Gardens, because what was associated with this particular place was a church called simply St John's Church. And what do you associate with the church? A cemetery. It wasn't a landscape gardens as it is today. The myth surrounding St John's Gardens and St George's Hall is that Harvey Lonsdale Elms is said to have wanted the steps sweeping down into the gardens, which is a total fallacy, because what great architect would want to have steps leading right down into a cemetery? That is a myth, because what Harvey Lonsdale Elms wanted was that the building itself was facing Lime Street Station, so that the rich people, and don't forget it was only the rich people in those days that could afford to travel by train. You're talking mid-19th century. Now these particular gardens here, or cemetery, would not accommodate the plateau, the steps, because the church was still here. And to accommodate those, the church would have had to be demolished. And it was not until 1898 that the church was finally demolished to make way for what we see today, are landscape gardens. The myth also surrounds the suicide of Harvey Lonsdale Elms. First and foremost, why would he want to commit suicide? Because he's supposed to have went away when the project started, the building of St George's Hall. That's a fallacy, because when he came back 12 years later after its completion, he's seen that it was built back to front. Absolute nonsense, because the lad did die, unfortunately, because he was suffering from a mid-19th century common disease, tuberculosis, unfortunately. And yes, he was sent away by his physician to a warmer climate to recuperate, but unfortunately he died in Jamaica 7 years before the completion of the hall in 1854. The myth surrounding St George's Hall being built back to front is totally unravelled, and also totally unravelled is the suicide of its architect Harvey Lonsdale Elms. In May 1644, at the height of the English Civil War, Prince Rupert arrived from Latham House in Ormskirk. After managing to release Lady Charlotte de Cromwell, the wife of Lord Derby, from the clutches of his enemy, the parliamentarians, he arrived here in Everton to lay siege to the castle. Today, people think that when Rupert arrived in 1644, he actually built this monument as a jail for captured prisoners and to use it as a fortress. It's a myth. So let's unravel this myth once and for all, because this monument here was not built until 1787 as a lockup for the drunks of Everton, and also it was used for the condemned men on the way to the gibbet in London Road. Incidentally, Everton Football Club adopted this monument to put it on their football jerseys, and it still can be seen today. As we walk down Castle Street, what we find is a sanctuary stone, and it's been here for hundreds of years. But what is a sanctuary stone, and most importantly, what were its uses? This is the sanctuary stone, and people who owed a lot of money to fellow businessmen had exchanged flags. If they were in pursuit of them, the creditors, they would jump on here and they would find sanctuary for at least 2 weeks. And that's why it's called the sanctuary stone. Incidentally, legend wrongly has it that if a slave jumped ship, ran up here and jumped on the sanctuary stone, he'd be a free man. Unfortunately, that is a total myth, because the sanctuary stone ceased to be the legislation of sanctuary in 1696, a whole 4 years before Liverpool was involved in the slave trade in 1700. When we come through to exchange flags, many people come through this part of the town every single day, whether they're workers or tourists. And what they will see is a fine monument. But unfortunately, what they assume is that the monument symbolises the slave trade. Now, let us unravel this myth. But what about the 4 figures on the monument? At a closer inspection, they are of European origin and not African. The figures represent prisoners taken from Nelson's 4 famous victories: the Battle of the Nile, the Battle of St. Vincent, the Battle of Copenhagen, and finally, his final battle, unfortunately, because he was killed by a French sniper's bullet, the Battle of Trafalgar. Each figure, therefore, represents the French prisoners of war. And when you look at the inscription closely, which many people don't bother to do, it reads, "England expects every man to do his duty." And there was only one man who said that, and that was Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson, the greatest British naval hero of all time. This was the actual site of the castle. And this is the view that Prince Rupert got from Everton Hill. Now this was a parliamentarian stronghold, garrisoned by the head of one of the most powerful families in Liverpool. There are 3 other major families in Liverpool. The Norrises, the Molyneux and the Stanleys were all confirmed royalists. The siege had only lasted 18 days, yet Prince Rupert successfully had taken the castle off Colonel John Moor, who made a cowardly mistake, taking with him his soldiers and leaving the citizens of Liverpool to fend for themselves. Over 360 citizens had lost their lives, but also it was a great cost to Prince Rupert himself, because he used up all his gunpowder, which was a great commodity at those days, and also 2,000 lives. So the siege, 18-day siege, had cost well over 2,000 lives on both sides. The castle was demolished in 1723 because of its wear and tear. Don't forget, it was built in 1235. And today stands Queen Victoria's monument, which was erected in 1906. As you can see in the background, the most famous birds in the world, the liver birds. Yet the people of Liverpool think that they're either mythical or cormorants with leaves in their beaks. There is also another misconception about how Liverpool derived its name through the word liver, meaning dirty pool. So what we have to do, we have to go right back to the beginning and King John's 1207 Royal Charter to put things in perspective. King John gave his royal blessing to one of his royal agents who had actually viewed a natural harbour in 1206, and this natural harbour was, of course, the mouth of the Mersey Tunnel as we see today. Now the pool lay here. This is where it finished, and believe it or not, it was 30 foot deep. The royal agent of King John viewed the pool, the natural harbour, from the small hamlet of Everton, Everton on the hill. And the pool, where you see it lay, went from here down Whitechapel into Paradise Street, Shavas Park and into the River Mersey. Let's remember, and it's important, that no baron nor lord owned the land. And when the king inquired about the land itself, he was told that it was nameless. And he asked what was there. And he said, the royal agent said, the locals called it the pool. And he said, well, what else is there? Is there anything significant? And what the royal agent said was, all around the shoreline was lots and lots of laver, an old Anglo-Saxon word meaning seaweed. Now King John put the two words together, laver and pool, and came up with Liverpool. And that is how we derived our name. When John gave his approval and made Liverpool a borough in 1207, he stamped the royal charter with the royal seal of the eagle of St. John, with laver, the seaweed, in the eagle's beak. Therefore, the liver bird is the eagle of both St. John and King John. The original eagle seal of King John was destroyed during the English Civil War when the parliamentarians had retaken Liverpool Castle in 1644. And after the restoration of King Charles II in 1660, an engraver could not quite get the eagle correct, and it turns out similar to a cormorant. Therefore, the tale about the liver bird being a mythical bird or a cormorant, and the name of Liverpool being derived from dirty water, is finally unravelled. This is Wellington's column, and not, another popular misconception, Nelson's column. And why is he looking out that way instead of into town and over the people of Liverpool? Well, he's actually looking as the crow flies towards Waterloo, his most famous victory of 1815 over Napoleon. And incidentally, the statue is made not from bronze or iron or stone or marble, but from the French cannons captured at Waterloo. The very first public chapel built in Liverpool, and I'm not talking about Walton, Kirkdale, West Derby, Everton, Toxteth, I'm talking about Liverpool, was St. Mary del Quays. Quays as in connotations with the water. However, the very first chapel built in Liverpool was in the castle grounds. William de Ferris Castle, built in 1235, also called St. Mary del Quays, but the Quays were spelt with the K, the keys of the new borough of Liverpool. The reasons why we have two chapels in Liverpool is because of the feudal system. Because when the ordinary people who built the church inside the castle went up to celebrate Mass, they were told by the sheriff to go away and build their own church, and don't build it on the castle grounds, build it somewhere else. So they came down to the water's edge and built their own chapel, the very first public chapel in Liverpool. Throughout the years, the chapel eventually became a church, and local people today know it as St. Nicholas's, but the full title is St. Mary's and St. Nicholas's, and it is, of course, the Mariners' Church, which it has been for many, many years. We are in the heart of the city centre in High Street, and people often wonder when they look at this main banking building why all the damage that's seen on the walls haven't been repaired. And why it hasn't been repaired is because it symbolises the 1941 May Blitz, when Hitler's Luftwaffe came over looking for a secret headquarters in this vicinity. In May 1941, Liverpool was under attack, and not for the first time. The previous siege was on the 21st of August 1775, when 2,000 sailors went on strike at the height of the slave trade. The reason for the strike was that the owners and the merchants of the ships decided to take 10 shillings a month away from the sailors' wages, and they were only on 30 shillings. So they decided there and then to unrig all the ships that were lying in port. Lord Derby's tower at the bottom of Water Street doubled as a jail, and the ringleaders, they were incarcerated in there. So the sailors, the rest of them, they decided there and then, hey, we've had enough of this. Went to the jail, rescued them, set them free, and then the merchants decided to hire special constables because there was no police in those days. Don't forget, we're talking 1775. The sailors got wind that these special constables, 300 in all, were hired by the owners and the merchants at 10 shillings a day, and they went absolutely berserk. And this street here, Castle Street, was full of gunsmiths, and the sailors, 2,000 in all, went in, all the gunsmiths, and stole the muskets and pistols with the sole purpose to lay siege and to blow up the town hall, because the mayor at the time, Peter Wright, was inside here with the 300 special constables, and he turned around and said, right lads, get out there and sort them. And they turned around and said, no, you go out there and sort them, because there's 2,000 of them there, there's only 300 of us. So therefore, the sailors started to blow up the town hall. There was massive structural damage caused by the cannons of the sailors. And why can't we see the evidence today of that damage? Simple, because the city of Liverpool hired one of our great architects, John Foster Sr., to redesign the whole front. And this is what you can see today, the gable end and the balcony. After massive damage and great expense, the sailors finally got their 10 shillings back a month. And the ringleaders, they were all rounded up and coerced into the Royal Navy to serve there for the rest of their lives. What makes a Crown Court and capital punishment appealing for public scrutiny? First, we have to look at their trials and the outcomes. Let's take, for example, the William Wallace murder case and the verdict that was reached. Wallace, an insurance agent for the Prudential, was accused of his wife's murder, Julia, in January 1931. The prosecution claimed that whilst Wallace was naked, he murdered his wife. That's why forensic experts at the time could not find a speck of blood upon his person. The jury found him guilty, and the presiding judge, Justice Wright, "You shall be taken from here to a place of execution, where you shall be hanged by the neck until you are dead, and may God have mercy upon your soul. Take him down." Then Wallace was taken down here to the holding cell. This is where Wallace would be waiting in the holding cell to be transported up to Walton Jail to be hanged for his wife's murder. It's a misconception even today that people think that William Wallace did hang for the murder of his wife, when in fact there was an appeal and he was completely exonerated from the murder because of lack of evidence. The weight of evidence against him was all circumstantial. Unfortunately, with the shock of the trial and the verdict, William Wallace died of an illness in Clatterbridge Hospital 2 years later in 1933. We all know about the bubonic plague of 1665, but there were also bubonic plagues throughout the country before that time. And here in Liverpool, there was a bubonic plague between the years of 1349 and 1359, which could have easily have wiped out the entire population of Liverpool at that time. The bubonic plague caused so much devastation throughout the land because buildings were built very close to one another, similar to these here now. However, Liverpool built their streets very, very wide. Leather Lane, here in the heart of Liverpool city centre, is the only medieval street left in Liverpool. And why it was called Leather Lane was because there was a tannery at the top. Although Liverpool has its narrow streets, the 7 original streets were built on an old Roman street plan, which, unbeknown to us, was going to work to our advantage. The advantage we had was that any lingering pestilence from the plague was blown away by the prevailing wind off the Irish Sea. We had a population of 1,000. Out of that 1,000, 300 unfortunately had died. 700 survived. Although we didn't know it at the time, that was the great advantage of the old Roman street plan and its wide streets. We have mentioned the 7 original streets, but what were those 7 original streets? The obvious first street was Castle Street, where the castle lay at the bottom of it. The second original street is Chapel Street, because of the chapel of St Mary del Keys and St Nicholas. The third street on the old Roman street plan is Dale Street, and it was a dale, and the dale ran into the pool. The fourth street was Bank Street, that ran into the banks of the river. Today it's called Water Street. The fifth street was Juggler Street, named after the entertainers who entertained the sheriff in the castle. Today it's named High Street. The sixth street on the plan was Whiteacre Street, but it had to change its name because there was an old hall built by the Moor family and it went to rack and ruin. So today we have Old Hall Street. The seventh and final street out of the 7 originals is Tithebarn Street. It hasn't always been called Tithebarn Street. It used to be called Moor Street after the most prominent family in Liverpool. It changed its name because people at the time paid tithes, which were taxes, at a barn which was on the street. Put the two together and what we have is Tithebarn Street. What is the urban myth between Liverpool and the American Civil War? Here at 19 Abercromby Square, the home of the American Confederacy, the consul, plots thickened on how to build a big battleship on the banks of the River Mersey. Carlyle, the biggest shipyard in the northwest, got the contract to build the biggest battleship for the Confederates. That is the Whiteacre. Now the Whiteacre, as we all know now, became the Alabama. But one thing that the Confederates had to do and concocted the plans here, right here, was to how to get the ship out unseen. In other words, in secret. The Whiteacre sailed quietly under the shrouds of darkness to its destination, Holyhead, where a Liverpool crew had been waiting, and it's there that they embarked on the ship and sailed into the American Civil War. That Liverpool crew created history by sinking more shipping than any other battleship in any war. And that is the connection between Liverpool and the American Civil War. Let's set the scene. Hope Street, 1826, and Mr. John Henderson, a Scottish fish oil importer, rented accommodation, a basement flat of the Reverend John McGowan. But what the Reverend McGowan did not know, and anybody else for that matter, that Mr. Henderson was running a very profitable business, and it was not fish oil. On one dark October night in 1826, a horrible stench emanated from the cellar of number 8 Hope Street. Special constables at the time smashed down the door, and what they found there, scattered all over the floor in barrels and sacks, were 22 bodies of men, women and children waiting to be pickled and shipped off to Edinburgh to the anatomical lectures. The basement was a body snatcher's paradise, and putting to rest the myth that Birkenhead was the only body snatchers in the entire country is false, because we had our own Birkenhead in the guise of John Henderson, who incidentally made them look small time, because Mr. Henderson was never ever found. Here in Rodney Street lies a myth, or in this case sits a myth, concerning a Scottish gentleman and his death. If you're a gambler, or maybe you're not a gambler, you will appreciate this particular story. The man in question, William McKenzie, a Scottish railway contractor, was an avid gambler in poker. His ambition was to have a royal flush, the highest hand you can have in poker. McKenzie said if he never fulfilled his ambition in life, in death, he wanted to be buried with a royal flush in his hand, sitting at a table with a glass of scotch. This was stipulated in Mackenzie's will, hence the pyramid where he was interred in 1868. So here in St Andrew's Churchyard, Rodney Street, lies or sits Mr. McKenzie. The myth is finally unravelled. Whether he's drank a scotch or shown his hand is a different story. After the Napoleonic Wars of 1815, there were many British soldiers who became unemployed, but there were also many French prisoners of war incarcerated here in Liverpool and nowhere to go. Yet one man came to their rescue, and that man was the Mole of Edgehill. So who was the legendary Mole of Edgehill? It was none other than this gentleman, Joseph Williamson. So why do people call him today in Liverpool the Mole of Edgehill? Because what do moles do? Well, moles burrow, and Joseph Williamson was a man who liked to burrow. Williamson needed the help to burrow a burrow of the French prisoners of war and the out-of-work soldiers. So what was the reason why Williamson wanted to burrow underground? Was it for a subterranean city? Was it for the railways? Was it for canals? Was it for anything? No. The reason why was absolutely nothing, because they were follies, every single tunnel. So why did Williamson spend the equivalent of £26 million of today's money building follies? There is no complicated answer, because these men, both British and the French, were destitute. The British soldiers were unemployed now. The French soldiers needed to be repatriated home, and unfortunately they had no money. Therefore, Joseph Williamson had these tunnels built and paid them their wages to feed families and for the Frenchmen to get home. The Williamson's tunnels did not go to waste. Not only did they serve as a design for the nation's railway system, the tunnels are still being excavated so that visitors can once again see the work of Joseph Williamson, the Mole of Edgehill. In the shadow of the Anglican Cathedral, when people walk through St James's Cemetery, they see this wonderful piece of architecture, the mausoleum, and they often ask, who built it and who lies in it? To answer the question, we have to look at one of the most bizarre incidents that happened in Liverpool folklore. The incident took place during the 1830 opening of the railway system at Edge Hill. The eminent Liverpool MP, William Huskisson, had seen Stephenson's rocket approaching with the British Prime Minister, the Duke of Wellington, aboard. He ran over the track to greet him, but was struck down by the steam engine and was severely injured. And through the injuries sustained, Huskisson unfortunately died. And it's here in the mausoleum that the world's first fatality of the railway system finally rests, William Huskisson. There is another bizarre twist to this tale, that the same William Huskisson was the model on the author Baroness Orski's Scarlet Pimpernel. Why? Huskisson actually did save some French aristocrats from the guillotine and smuggled them into England during the 1789 French Revolution. And that's where she got the idea from. As a historian, I get facts and figures every day. Yet, one thing I didn't know was that Oliver Cromwell was actually interred here at St. James's Cemetery. I could not resist the challenge to find out if Oliver Cromwell was buried here. And lo and behold, he is, but not the Oliver Cromwell I know, but unfortunately, this Oliver Cromwell. I really hope that you have enjoyed Liverpool Unravelled. As you know, we have only scratched the surface, but I would dearly love you to join me next time on Frank Carlyle's Liverpool's Architecture Unseen.